This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. My next guest was described to me by Kate Ceberano as the god of Australian music. Apart from the church, he's been in too many alt music bands to count, worked with artists here and abroad, and with the church has recorded over 26 full-length albums. Well, that's what I counted anyway. They're about to embark on a singles tour around Australia. Lead singer, bass guitarist of the church, Steve Kilby joins me. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you.
That's big accolades there from Kate Ceberano. Isn't she lovely?
Yeah, that's very kind of her to say that. It's a bit hard to live up to, isn't it?
It is. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
Now you're starting on a tour which is promoting the singles. The singles tour, right? Yes,
it is.
You must sit back and just pinch yourself at the amount of music that you have put out over the years. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of music, an awful lot of music, but over a long period. You got to imagine, 45 years, almost half a century. But it's a lot. It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody can ever have everything because even I've forgotten everything I've ever done, and people keep reminding me, I'll remember this and remember that, and there's a lot of stuff out there.
Do you get that in concerts where people go, "Oh, I wish you could sing this song," and you're like, "I don't even remember that song, let alone singing it."
Yeah, people. You would imagine that a guy could play any of his songs at any given time.
Yeah.
Like any song that I have ever written, you'd imagine I should be able to pick up a guitar and play it, but I can't.
Yeah.
I only have a very small number in my head that I can play at any particular point that I remember all the words and all the chords. Probably only like 30 or 40. That I could confidently render. And then there's the songs I half remember, and then as you say, songs I don't remember at all. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
What about that original first single that you did, She Never Said, the first release?
What about it?
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. I have recontextualized that for acoustic guitar.
Right.
And the church played it last year after having not played it for almost since it came out. It was only very briefly in the set in the early days, and then it was considered unchurchy. I actually wrote that. A lot of people don't know this, but when the church happened, I also was pursuing another career in sort of electronic music.
Right.
And I had synthesizers and drum machines, and She Never Said was originally sort of like a boom 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 boom, like She Never Said boom boom boom, and then the church heard it and recontextualized it into an electric rock song, and now I've recontextualized into an acoustic song, but it really started off as a kind of an electro pop song. And I think it's sort of when we discovered, especially during the Blurred Crusade, when we really figured out who we were and what we were doing, that song got discarded and we never played it again until last year when the church, as it is now, picked it up again and we started doing it again. So, I remember that one. I thought it was a good song.
Yeah.
I don't think all the songs I've ever done are great, but I don't think that was a bad song. I think it could have been a bit more of a hit.
Yeah.
It didn't do anything at all, It was totally ignored and disappeared into obscurity very quickly.
But it gave you like you said, the sound of the church. It really sort of contextualized what the church was all about, and from there you became this band that Glenn A. Baker described as psychedelic tinge sound that alternatively found favour and disfavour in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. When we first popped up, some of the old guard didn't really like us, and they thought we'd sort of come out of nowhere, like in the days when that would be considered suspicious. These days, there was this idea you had to pay your dues.
Yeah.
And that had to be a conspicuous thing where it couldn't just involve just popping up on Countdown and bang, there you were. Although that would be considered okay these days. That's how it's done. But people thought that we just popped out of nowhere. But actually, I was 26, and I've been slogging away for 10 hard years at this. I got my first bass when I was 16 in 1970, and I've really been slogging away at music and forming and disbanding and getting kicked out of bands and buying equipment and, getting loans from banks and buying tape recorders and working on it for 10 hard years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it seemed like, he's just come out of nowhere. But there was a lot of work behind that,
I think reading that one of the first bands that you were in, you played with Peter Copes in Baby Grand, which was a glam rock band.
Yes, Peter Copes. He was in Baby Grand for a while. We were a kind of a glam rock band. We were sort of like, I don't know, Rolling Stones, New York Dolls.
Yeah.
We were like whichever record I bought that week, that's what we were like, So if I bought a Roxy Music record, I was singing like Brian Ferry, and then if next week I bought, I don't know. I wanted to be David Bowie, but I think we were more like the Sweet than David Bowie. It obviously didn't have the depth of imagination. And it was in Canberra, and everybody had a day job, and we weren't really giving it everything. And I don't know, it was a sort of half-assed band at best. We did have one foray up to Sydney, but other than that, we only ever played in Canberra.
It's funny you should mention David Bowie. That you wanted to sound like David Bowie. I was playing just in the station. I was playing Hypnagogue, and one of the guys came in and said, "My God, that sounds like David Bowie." So 40 years on, here you are playing. Your band's sort of gone full circle, and now you've released a song in 2024 that. People are going, well, that sounds like David Bowie. I mean,
you know what?
What?
Well, it's funny you should say that. So you start off, for example, with me, I started off really wanting to be David Bowie. And then after a couple of years into the church, I sort of wanted to cover all that up. I sort of wanted to be just me. And then right at the end, like making the Hypnagogue, it started to sound like David Bowie again, and I just thought, fuck it, like, it can be like David Bowie. David Bowie isn't doing it anymore.
No.
And I actually had a dream, and I'm not joking. David Bowie came to me in my dream and said, I said, hey, he was sitting on the end of my bed, and I went, hey, I feel kind of guilty because I'm sort of like, ripping you off all the time. And he said, don't feel guilty. He said, I can't do it, and I hereby authorize you to go out there and be as David Bowie as you like. I felt really good about that when I woke up. I told everybody. And then from that moment on, I have let my inner Bowie rise, and I don't try and keep it down at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in this strange post-world. Like in 1982, for me to say, oh, I want to sound like Bowie, and to really sound like Bowie and emphasize the Bowie bits would have been a really bad idea.
Yeah.
But now in this post-modern world we live in, everything's okay. Everything's kosher. Isn't it? You can't, especially for a band like The Church, we can't really make a wrong move. Whatever we do is okay. There's nobody really left to criticize us. You know what I mean? I'm older than any critic that writes about me. And nobody minds if I'm being like David Bowie. They like it. But like 40 years ago, that would have been a dreadful mistake to have come on and been too much like him. So it's funny how these things sort of they change over time.
And of course, you know, you mentioned the spirit of David Bowie. You know, you had a dream about that. A lot of your music is very steeped in imagery, Christian, pagan, occult, Hindu. How much of that sort of is Steve Kilby, and how much is just musical inspiration?
I'm really interested in all that stuff, and Bowie was too. I'm really interested. I'm interested in the Bible. I'm interested in Bhagavad Gita. I'm interested in surrealism. I'm interested in Jung and dreams and science fiction and science fantasy. Obviously, everybody knows I took a load of drugs. But I was always, in taking those drugs, I was looking for other worlds that I could find inspiration, you know, and so altered states of consciousness, meditation, you know, all of these things have always interested and fascinated me all of my life. I mean, I just didn't hit sort of 20 and go, oh, I need to write songs about something. You know, paganism's a good subject, you know. So they are my preoccupations, these things that get into songs. It's not an act.
No.
It's really no, but it could be, and if it was an act, that would be okay too. But the truth is, I am fascinated by those things. I am quite I would imagine I could give a theologist a good run for his money. You know, when I see Jehovah's Witnesses standing there, you know, a free course in Bible study, I feel tempted to go up and have a chat with them. And I think I know a lot about religion. You know, the absurdity of it and the profundity of it. You know, like I remember we used to have a minister would come to our school once a week when I was growing up, when they still had this stuff. And the other kids loved it because he and I would get in, you know, I'd go, you know, hey, Reverend, explain the Trinity. Is that a literal Trinity or is that a figurative Trinity? And, you know, at 10 years old, and the kids would go, great. And he and I would have this discussion about what it all meant. And the rest of the kids would just sort of sit around picking their noses and going, great. Steve Kilby's, you know, he's taking the brunt of this. But I was really interested.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in these things. So yeah, I brought it all into the music.
Have you found your truth? That's a deep question, isn't it?
No, I have. And I did have I wrote about it in my book. I had an experience, my one and only real experience that I ever had with God, when I was in rehab in America and I was coming off heroin, and I had been addicted to this very, very strong type of brown heroin that I was smoking and shooting, and I went into this rehab place, and when I came off it, I was in such agony. Yeah. I was in psychic, physical, mental, spiritual agony. And one night, I couldn't bear it anymore. got down on my hands and knees. I got down with my face on the floor in the yoga position. People who do yoga, the pose of the child. I was there with my face, my whole body on the floor, and I surrendered and I said, I've made such a mess of this, God, please, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you are there, if you care. I actually said, I've heard you never give someone more than they can handle. I said, I can't handle one more second of this. I don't know what to do with myself. And then it came. And then I had this marvelous thing happen for me. And it lasted about an hour. And then my ego got in the way. And it went away. But the memory of what happened, of feeling this wonderful just warmth and light, and all of my aches and pains went away, all of them. Vomiting and sweating and stuff stopped. I lay down on my bed and had this lovely little dream, and I was standing by a lake with Lord Krishna, and we were standing there this beautiful afternoon in India, having talking about philosophical things and talking about life and love, and I will never forget it. And people say to me, I meet people, say, do you believe in God? And I go, no, I know there is a God. And I went through hell to have that experience. But the problem is, for me, the reason I only had that experience then was because that was the only time I could have complete surrender.
Yeah.
You can't say to God, oh, I'm a bit bored, I'm feeling a bit sad. Hey, God, can't you come here and cheer me up? You have to really, you've got to ask for it with every fiber of your being. I've never been able to ask for it again in that way. That's how it was for me. Maybe other people can tap into it a lot easier than me, but for me, it had to be, you hear people say, it won't be until you hit bottom. Well, that was the moment I hit bottom. And that's when it was there for me. And only my own ego chased him back away. When my ego woke up. The ego that got me in all that trouble woke up and said, well, look at you. Now you've had God in your head, and wow, I always knew God would think you were a pretty cool guy. And as the ego woke up and started sprouting all this rubbish, the spirit fled away, as you would imagine it would. I once read, just a last word on this subject, I once read that Mark Bolan in an interview said, I think if God appeared in this room right now, he'd think I'm a pretty cool guy. You see? That's the thinking that gets us into trouble. That's where it all starts going wrong.
Yeah, but you're right. It's when it happens, and you wrote about it, the unguarded moment. It's that moment when you let your guard down completely. You're completely on the floor, and then the unreal happens.
Yeah. Yes, it takes something. Well, not for everybody. I'm sure it's like music. There are people who are born and they're musical right from the moment they pop out, and at each point in time they can be musical. For me, it's not like that, and it's not like that for me either with God. It had to be this terrible catastrophe that made it bad enough for me to reach out sincerely. It has to be sincere. I always think of okay, I've got 5 kids of my own. I can imagine I'm sitting in another room and the kids are going, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And I'm like, I'm not coming in there just for that. If suddenly you hear a scream, no, you run in there. What's going on?
Yes.
I think God might be like that. He's not available to appease your idle curiosity or your boredom, or, he's not going to appear for you just because, the internet's down.
Yeah.
You've really got to warrant it. But I believe that he is there, and I've read other people saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to say to the universe, I hear you don't give out more than people can handle.
Yeah.
I've heard other people in AA and NA type situations say the same thing. When you've had enough and you really ask for it, you will find it. And I've got to say, yes, that worked for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's it. It's interesting because like a lot of that comes through in everything that you write, and maybe you're writing things leading up to that moment that things were still coming through because subconsciously, you were leading to that moment, and definitely afterwards, it's still coming through. But like you said, it's all part of you. It's part of your DNA now.
Yeah, well, I've early on, I felt like pop music, which is the only music I understand. I don't really understand classical. I don't understand jazz. I don't like country. I don't like or understand anything really except pop music, what you would call pop music, from the Beatles onwards. I've always felt like pop music had the propensity to be a lot more spiritual than it was. And I remember an interview with Brian Wilson where he said, I was writing teenage symphonies to God. And it's, you listen to Good Vibrations, that's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
And I always felt like and that's why the band's called The Church. I always felt like rock and roll doesn't have to be about AC/DC and, this kind of, stuff. And the Beatles, of course, the Beatles touched on it, and Dylan touches on it, and Bowie certainly touched on it, and Mark Bolan in T-Rex, and Sigur Rós, the Icelandic band, they touch on it all the while. I think there's this spiritual component to rock, to pop music, that I get a huge spiritual whack out of my favorite music. I listen to Let It Be. I know that's a song everybody's heard a million times. That bit where the harmonies cut in, it's just Strawberry Fields Forever. It's, there's a lot can go on in rock and roll. It doesn't have to all be just about ordinary, I met a girl and I had a drink and I drove my car and I got in a fight, and it doesn't have to all be that. And some of it is, and good for them that do that. But I never wanted to do that. And when I heard the Beatles, when they changed, when they started smoking weed and started running all that weird stuff, and then when Bowie and Bolan came along, they were showing this other way of doing things, and that's what I always wanted to do. I don't want to have songs about the usual old things, and so I've always trying to get this other thing into my songs.
Do you think though it's a natural progression, and it's like life? When we're younger, we don't think. Most people don't think about the more spiritual things. As we get older, we get sort of closer to that point of, well, it's nearly the end of my life. Do you think that we start to gravitate towards that spirituality, and is that the same with a life, like the lifespan of a band?
I'm not sure. I think people who start gravitating towards spirituality as they get older and start approaching their own mortality, I don't think that's the same thing as, although that's perfectly justifiable and understanding. I'm probably going to die in the next 5 years. I better start thinking about God and heaven and hell and all of that. But this has always been my thing, and this is always what I've been looking for when I read a book, or when I saw a film, or when I listened to music, or had a conversation. I was always looking for this otherworldly thing in whatever sort of form it came in. I've always been gravitating towards that. I don't know. You look at a lot of bands. Well, look at AC/DC. If you want to, they started out they didn't progress towards a spiritual kind of place.
No.
They're still, but the Beatles did.
Yeah.
You know, the Beatles started out, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and then they end up, you know, "My Sweet Lord," and George Harrison's beautiful album, "All Things Must Pass."
Yeah, incredible.
One of the most incredible spiritual records you'll ever hear. Almost all of the songs on there. You know, "The Art of Dying," "All Things Must Pass," "All Things Must Pass Away." They all, and John, you know, John grappled with it as well in so many ways. Some people just go on doing what they did right at the beginning. You know, the Rolling Stones didn't really get any more spiritual as they went on. They, you know, they just keep on rocking, and that's all right as well.
Good.
I mean, you don't have to evolve and change and grow, but it's great. It is great when it does happen, and you see that happen.
This wanting to go deeper, you know, is that a big reason why, you know, you fought the record labels when they said, "Oh, we want to be more radio friendly"?
Yeah, because this is what I do. It's just silly to sign me up and try and get me to be like Simon Le Bon. like, you know what I mean? Like, or to get me to be like, I don't know, whoever it was at the time, whoever was Hall and Oates, you know, like.
Just imagine that.
This is what I do. This is my specialty. So when the record companies were trying to get me off, you know, they want this just very ordinary, obvious kind of cheerful, happy, you know, middle of the road kind of thing. I didn't want to do it. They thought that I was doing it to be difficult, and they thought, because every now and then I would accidentally write a hit, they thought I could do it at will, and then when I wrote a song that wasn't a hit, they thought I was just doing it to be difficult. And usually because I was such unreasonable sort of people, I didn't bother. I didn't have a conversation like this with them. I let them think, "Oh yeah," you know, and they go, you're just doing this to be difficult. You know, you're deliberately shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Or you're making life hard for everybody around you when you could really just go home and write a hit whenever you like. But it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
And if it was, my God, I would have written 50 hits. And
well, you did pretty well though, and maybe the songs that became hits, you know, that they were bona fide, you know, hits because they weren't that top 40 formula.
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it's great to have a hit with a song that wasn't written to be a hit, and to me, I mean, this is important. I mean, most people don't bloody care. They hear a song on the radio and go, "Oh, isn't that great? I can hum along with that." And I'm like, no, that just sounds to me like some guy trying to have a hit and just writing the most ordinary song by numbers, most obvious old stuff. But people don't care about that.
No.
But my songs were all accidents. And that's what I think was good about them. And you can't replicate that. You can't go, "Oh," you know, the stupid thing was that After Under the Milky Way was a really big hit everywhere. The record company's going, "Well, why don't you write another one like that, but different?" It's like, because I can't do that. It's not that I won't do it.
Yeah.
You know, I thought about it, but I couldn't. It wasn't possible. It wasn't my modus operandi. You know, hoped another one would come along, but it didn't. And I could understand why it didn't. And it would put me in a bad place with my own creativity to try and make it do something it didn't want to do. And the results would be embarrassing. I know that. So I just let it be, and I let it go, do whatever it wants to do. It's easy to say all of this now, now that the pressure's off. But, you know, when you're sitting in a boardroom in 1980, whatever, 84, 86, 88, you're sitting there with someone going, Steve, you know, you guys are unrecouped and, you know, you're being difficult in the studio and we want to get this producer in and we want you to get your hair cut and, you know, what's this with the beard? You know, we don't want that. You know, why can't you just, you know, we'll put you with this songwriter that's written 50 hits for the Backstreet Boys, you know, and you can put you two together and come up with something. They can't understand why you don't think that's a good idea. And it's really like, it's different now saying all of this. I was fighting against the zeitgeist. Can you imagine? It's like 1986 and they're going, everybody should sound like, I don't fucking know, the Thompson Twins. Yeah. You know, hold me now, with a drum machine and all that. And I'm going, look, I don't want to do that. And like, why? That's what, you know, that's what everybody wants. It's like, no, but I'm playing the long game.
Yes.
And they're like, we don't care about the long game. We need to make some money. You know, we just spent $300,000 on you and you're not delivering stuff. And I was like, I was fighting against something. And now we can sit back in 2025. I can say the Thompsons, they wanted me to be like the Thompson Twins. And you can laugh and I can laugh. And anybody who's listening go, oh my God, the Thompson. But you know, 1986, no one was laughing.
No.
And so I'm sitting there. You should see the office Clive Davis had in Arista. And one day he summons me up there. It's like being summoned before the bloody governor of the jail, you know, you're going to discuss. No, seriously.
Yeah.
There was a special lift and these bodyguards came and got me and they got in the special lift and the lift opened up and there in this great big room is this legendary guy that's had a documentary made about him now, Clive Davis, and he's sitting at this desk surrounded by gold records, and you're just an insignificant insect in his world. And he's going, Mr. Kilby, I hear you being uncooperative, and do you know how much money have I invested in you? And, you know, why aren't you delivering the hits? And I thought you wanted to be on Arista and you're not playing ball. And it's really serious, you know?
Yeah.
Once again, I'm sitting here looking out my window now. I'm an old guy, and none of that matters anymore. And we can have a good laugh, but it was really frightening. You know, as frightening as it could get. You know, the kind of frightening I got in music to get away from having to deal with situations like that. Like really, and I couldn't really. Now I can understand why everything turned out the way it did, but back then you couldn't say, well, I still want to have a career in 2025, and if I wear the clothes and make the videos and do the things you want me to do, I will have an ephemeral little short career that no one will remember because I was just the same as everybody else.
Yes.
And my creativity and my gut feeling is not to do that. My thing has always been try and do something a little bit different. You know, I didn't want to, you know, wasn't that, what I wanted to do wasn't that different, but that there was a real mold, you know, this mold they were trying to squeeze you into in the 80s, the guys in the record companies and stuff. They really wanted you to conform. And they thought you should be like everything else on the charts. And they would hold you up and they'd go, you know, you've sold 50,000 records and this guy here, he sold 8 million. Now, how are we going to make you more like him? And I'm like, if I was there to say, well, I don't want to be like him, then they'd get really angry and go, how dare you, you little, you know, you Australian pipsqueak, come here and say that. You know what I mean? And the producers you're working with, going, yeah, we had Jackson Browne in last week and he sold 10 gazillion records and you're a nobody from Sydney, Australia, and, you know, you sold no records, and it's sort of it's a weird thing. And now I would know what to say. Now I've been through it all and I've had this long career and I'm still playing good places. I still have a career in America going around every year, in Australia and Europe if I wanted to, still selling enough records to survive. I understood that I had to stick to my guns, but it wasn't very popular at the time, and it estranged me from the rest of the band sometimes, from our managers, from the record companies and publishers, who all thought I was deliberately withholding something that I could easily do.
But you've proven that you haven't, because the body of work, we started the conversation, the body of work is so great and so massive, and the fans that you've had that have not been the typical 80s music fans, they're people who have cherished your work and have grown with you throughout the years.
Yes, but it was no good saying. It was no good saying that back in the day.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of this you can see, looking back on it, that I was. It's like an Antarctic expedition, and everybody's going, oh no, we're lost, and the captain's going, we have to grimly press forward. This is the only thing we can do. And everybody's panicking, and there's a mutiny, and nobody wants to do it. Once it's all over, and you've proven you did know what you were doing, it's different. But while you're in the middle of all of that, there was a lot of chaos. Of course, look, we're not even talking about music now. We're talking about the drive to be successful and sell records. And this is the problem. And all of the, back in the day, all of the interviews were about, why are you on this label, and how do they treat you, and how much of an advance did you get, and why did you go with that producer? And no one's even talking about the lyrics and the songs and stuff. And that's just what I tried to stay focused on. And luckily enough, I got through, and here I am telling the tale.
Yeah. Is there anything you do differently? I mean, looking back in retrospect.
Yeah. I wouldn't be so abrasive.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be rude to journalists and guys in radio stations. I wouldn't have been so rude to the other guys in the band and rude to audiences, and I probably toned down, all my abrasiveness, and I would try to be a bit more understanding.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe I have a personality defect that has, heroin addiction took a lot of rough edges off me. And because I had to learn, I learned what it was like to be out on the street, hustling to get a fix in the end. And, old age, I'm 70 now, and I don't want to be rude and abrasive anymore. But when I was 25, I was hot-headed, and, I didn't always treat people the best way. That's what I regret.
Yeah.
That the way I acted, the way I treated other people. I don't regret musical things. I don't regret artistic decisions. I just regret my own behavior.
Yeah.
In a world of bad behavior, I wasn't the only one. There's a lot of bad behavior going on all around. And I wish I had been more of a reasonable human being throughout all of that. And being a pop star, you're not, thanks, Kate, but you're not God. You're just an idiot that can strum a guitar and put a song together. But it's tempting sometimes to think it's more than that.
Yeah.
And you have, we all have serious delusions of grandeur. And you look at how unhappy some of the most famous people have been. You look at Elvis Presley and who was a Whitney Houston, and you look at these people. They have so much talent. They have so much success. They have so much money. and they all die sad and broken and lonely. There's a reason for that. And, you know, when I see Paul McCartney, and he's seemingly such a regular guy, I think that's a real triumph of his upbringing and his steadfastness of going, I'm not going to let this affect me. I'm just going to be a regular guy. And he kept on being a regular guy, and he's still a regular guy. A very famous and talented regular guy, but, you know, he's still he's just an ordinary bloke. And he never thought, I don't think he ever thought he was anything else, just a very talented bloke. But a lot of us in showbiz, you know, it's very hard going on stage and people cheering and clapping and throwing themselves at you in all kinds of ways. It's very hard to resist all of that. Yeah.
Your song that you did with Kate and Sean as well, great song, great you know, album, Dangerous Age. But the song Monument City Lights, 1973, does that you know, does that song talk about the you know, how we were when we were younger, and the bright lights of everything, and how we reflect back on it now as that golden age?
I guess it does, yeah. A lot of my songs are about that. A lot of my songs are, the bright city lights and the attraction of youth and the glamour and even further back, childhood. You know, a lot of my songs are about nostalgia, and sometimes nostalgia for times I never even had.
Yeah.
And songs about love affairs I never even had, people I never even met. Just longing and wanting and yearning and all of that kind of thing, for things that every human being has to get used to that, you know. Once upon a time, you know, I had a beautiful girlfriend and I had a fast car and we drove into town and things were great. And now I'm an old man, you know, or now I'm an unemployed man, or now I fought in a war and had my legs blown off, or whatever it is in the song. There are a lot of songs about that. That great line in that Fleetwood Mac song, you know, what you had and what you lost, what you have and what you lost. And all, as you move through life, you're constantly realizing. I had a ball when all my children were very small and they were all 3 or 4. And then one day you realize they're all in their 20s and 30s, and you're never going to have those tiny little kids back again. No. And that's a form of loss as well as real loss, you know, when your parents and your friends actually pass away, and when your career's over, and when Springsteen sings about it. A lot of Springsteen songs are coming from this angle. A proud guy who once had stuff and now it's been taken away, or time's taken it away, or the economy's taken it away. I think it's a really popular thing. It's a way of dealing with this feeling of you know, as the Kinks, Ray Davies, where have all the good times gone?
Yeah. Well, that's probably a great spot to finish there, because we're remembering all the good times with your tour and your incredible music that you've written, and we could talk all day. I've got to say, I love the fact that your music is so reflective of you as a person, and it gives me a lot of faith that that there is still good music out there, and artists that do want to, you know, sing songs that
there's got to be.
Inspire. There have to be.
There's got to be. There's got to be. At any point in time, now, then, in the future, there's always people who are trying to really make music or make films or write books that, and once again, I know there's been a real Dave quoting thing. John Lennon, I want to turn you on. It's like, that's really where it's at, you know, like, I want to turn people on with this music, and I think there will always be people out there trying to turn you on if you're lucky enough to sort of stumble across them, for sure.
Yeah. Steve, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you.